Okay, it is 2 p.m. and I will call the Tuesday, November 26th regular council meeting to order and begin with a land acknowledgement that the City of Fort Saskatchewan is located on Treaty 6 territory and Métis Nation of Alberta District 11. We recognize that we stand upon the land that carries the footsteps of many Indigenous peoples, including the Nihilwak, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, and Métis. And the city honors the First Peoples of this land and is committed to fostering reconciliation through relationship building, knowledge gathering, and education. And since we do have some guests in the room, just a few housekeeping rules. If for any reason emergency would go off, we do have a muster point outside, and I would suggest following staff. They will get you there nice and safe. And if you do need washrooms, out into the main lobby. So welcome. Okay, so with that, we do have items for the consent agenda, which include 3.1, approval of the minutes of November 12th, 7.1, changing the December 10th council meeting start time to 1 o'clock, and 7.2, cancellation of the November 28th council meeting that was set up for the purposes of budget. If I could have a motion for that. Councillor Nguyen.
Yeah, I'll move that council approve the agenda items 3.1, 7.1, and 7.2 as presented.
All right, thank you very much. Does anybody wish to have any of those separated? If not, I will close the motion. Please cast your vote. Whoops. And that is carried. This is the opportunity if there's anybody who wishes to speak as part of a delegation, and I'm not seeing anybody in the audience who isn't supposed to be here, so nobody has pre-registered, so we will skip that area and we will go directly on to presentations. 2024 audit plan. Colleen Wagner to introduce this. Welcome, Colleen.
All right, good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. Today it's my great pleasure to introduce Sheldon Jacobs. He's a partner with KPMG, and he's going to go through our 2024 audit plan as we are coming to that time of year again. So I will turn it over to Sheldon, and after he's done presenting, if there are any questions, we will gladly field those.
Great. Welcome, Sheldon.
Yes, good afternoon, Your Worship and members of Council. So I'm just going to touch on the key points of our audit planning efforts for fiscal 2024. With me this afternoon, sitting behind is Temi Topiarasi. Last time I was at Council, Christina Lothian was my colleague with me, but she's away on mat leave, so Temi's going to be working with me on your audits this year. So the first page speaks to the scope of the audit work that we're going to be doing between now and when we report to Council in April. There's a number of different pieces of work that we do for the city of Fort Saskatchewan. The one that takes the most amount of time is the actual audit of the city's accounts. In addition to that, we also append an auditor's report to the municipal financial information return, which goes to the provincial government. We also audit the library board, and every 3 years we do specified audit procedures on the local authority's pension plan, so that's on a triennial basis. And then we also provide an audit report on program reporting for the FCSS program. So the only change really for this year is the addition of the work that we do on LAP, and again, that's every 3 years. I'm just going to go through the slides. The other items we'll touch on here on the other slides, so I'm just going to advance forward. Last year was a year, if you remember, we had a number of accounting standards that were implemented by administration in the financial statements, and there are standards that are required by all municipalities to adhere to going forward. This year there's 3 more, but they're not as heavy as the other ones were in the past. The 3 of them relate to public-private partnerships, revenues, and intangibles. For most municipalities, it's the revenue standard that has a bit more of an impact, but even then it's not really that significant. Your typical revenue sources or your larger revenue sources such as grant revenue or property tax revenue are not impacted by these changes. These changes are really impacting revenues that are more of a miscellaneous nature, so things like permitting or user fees. And really what it is that there's been some diversity in practice across the country. So what the standard setters have done is they've come out and they've provided a little bit more guidance on some of these other areas in terms of how these items should be recognized in the financial statements of municipality, just to get more consistency across the country. I know that finance has been working through these standards, and we'll be looking at any of the conclusions that come out of that work, but don't anticipate any material changes compared to prior years, like maybe we saw last year with the asset retirement obligation standard that was adopted by all the municipalities in Canada. Moving on to newly affected auditing standards, there's not a lot this year. There's one standard which relates to what we call group audits. And group audits is where there's a number of different organizations that become part of one reporting unit. And you have that here with the city, because the consolidated financial statements of the city include the accounts of the city, and they also include the accounts of the library board. But the library is very, very small in relation to the overall operations for the city. So this standard, although it's new for this year and it speaks to how we have to deal with the various components in a set of consolidated financial statements, will not have any significant impact on your audit just because of how small the library board is. During the course of our audit this year, we'll follow up on any observations or comments that came out of last year's audit. And what we will do, to the extent that there's any items that administration we're dealing with since last April, we'll provide a report to council on the status of those items. And then I also spoke to LAP, which is on a triennial basis, and we'll be doing some incremental work there this year. In the past, I've spoke to the concept of materiality. Materiality this year is roughly the same as last year at $2.8 million. Basically what that number does is that allows us to scope the audit work that we do. We do look at significant transactions that are $2.8 million and above, but we also look at smaller transactions. So the work that we do will be done on a sample basis, and we'll get quite a cross-section in terms of the population that we look at when we do our audit work. But what this number does do is it allows us, or it gives us an element of scope to our work, so that we're not, looking at small transactions that would be clearly immaterial to the financial statements. I spoke about the group audit, and again, that's really the combination of the city's accounts and the library's accounts, and we've just done a little bit of rough math here, but if you take a look at the consolidated results, for the most part on an asset basis, 99.8% of the assets come from the city, and a very small percentage comes from the library board, and from a revenue perspective too, in excess of the revenues come from the city itself. So although we do audit the library board separately, we actually don't include it in our overall conclusions when we report on the city's financial statements, because it's clearly insignificant. Now, if the library board, or if you had other entities that the city controlled that were of a significant nature, we would not only report to you on the accounts of the city, but we would also report to you on the accounts of those operations as well, as part of our overall consolidated reporting. Moving on to the risks associated with financial reporting that we focus on as we go through the audit. The first risk that we have here, or the main risk we have here, is management override. And this is something that's required in all audits. Management is in a situation where internal controls can be overridden or bypassed potentially. So we always look to make sure that we're comfortable that there's no abuse of any controls that exist in the system that would result in a material misstatement in the financial statements. We look at various journal entries. We look at various estimates that are made just to be comfortable that these transactions fairly represent the underlying business transactions that they should represent and aren't of an unusual nature or a nature specific to misrepresenting or manipulating financial reporting for other reasons other than clearly representing the transactions of the city. During the course of our audit, we give consideration to fraud. And when we go through our audit, we will interview various members of the administration. We will get a sense for what fraud controls exist at the city, if there's been any fraud or illegal activities that have been reported to council, if there were any such items that were significant, how did administration and council deal with those? Those are important things for us to understand and also be aware of as we do a financial statement audit. What we've done here is we listed a number of questions here, some things for council to think about, not only today, but as you exercise your duties over the course of the year as it relates to any irregularities or fraud that could exist in the organization. My ask of you is, if to the extent that there is ever anything during the course of the year, or as we go from here till when we report to April, if there's anything that's of a material nature that may not have been reported to us by administration, that a member of council would reach out to us and we'd have that conversation. Again, if there's anything that comes to our attention that is significant and important, we would do the reciprocal. Next page is really the key milestones and deliverable dates. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this this slide. It basically outlines the key activities between the start of the audit, which really started in October, right through our final reporting to council, which is currently scheduled for April 22nd. And with that, there's 3 appendices, and I don't plan to go through them in detail. They're there for council's information. And with that, concludes the formal portion of my report.
All right, thank you very much for the report. Now, typically we would have this at Committee of the Whole, but we've actually not got Committee of the Whole in November or December, so I will open this one up since it is for information that you can ask clarifying questions and make brief comments. Councillor Harris?
So yesterday we heard that Macy's had an employee that hid $154.6 million, and Macy's did not release their third quarter financial results. As a result, they were having to deal with it. How, as an auditor, can you ensure council that we don't have a similar type of an employee in our organization or any public organization that could be in a position to hide a significant amount of money of that type? Obviously, I respect that auditing in the States and Canada might be 2 different animals, but how can you assure us that the work that you do with the tests and the materiality and all that sort of stuff will catch that potential nefarious activity?
Through your worship, I'll answer Councillor Harris's question. To start off with, we can't ever ensure or assure that would be the case. So our professional standards require us to be mindful of and to perform procedures such that if there's a material misstatement, that hopefully we have the ability to capture that during the course of our audit. And we're looking for misstatements in the actual financial statements. The challenge with auditing is we get to what we call a level of assurance called reasonable assurance. So reasonable assurance is if we follow our auditing standards, if we apply prudent auditing practices, it's our intention that we would hopefully find material misstatements like you've mentioned. The auditing theory, the auditing standards also recognize that absolute assurance is not possible, which sometimes people believe or hope that auditing could, ultimately get to. The issue is and why we can't get to absolute assurance is because our work is done on a test basis. So we don't test every transaction of any organization. If we did that, audits would take months and months and months to complete. And really, at the end of the day, once the financial reporting was released, probably would be of little value to any user because it would be so dated. So, from our perspective, we give consideration to things like when we do our testing, we do apply our testing not only, like I said earlier, to large amounts, but to even smaller amounts. And we kind of spread the testing around with the intention that we get enough of a visibility on the whole population that if there was something large or unusual, that we would capture it. We also get an understanding of the controls that are in place here at the city. And when we do that, we have to get sufficient knowledge of the controls to allow us to perform our audit procedures and to plan our audit procedures. We do not, under professional auditing standards, have to test every single control in an organization. So that's another area where something could be missed potentially. We also do look for transactions that are unusual, transactions that appear to maybe not have business substance or commercial substance or outside the normal course of business. We will also run routines on your data to look for transactions that just don't look right. And I don't want to disclose all of those routines publicly because the idea is we kind of keep those to ourselves so that, it's a bit of a surprise for those that we're auditing. But, as an example, we could look to see when entries are booked at specific times of the day or specific days of the week. So did somebody post entries in your ledgers at 1:30 in the morning on a stat holiday? You wouldn't expect that type of behavior, that type of activity. So those are the things that we do look for. At the end of the day, responsibility over the controls and responsibility for the detection of fraud and illegal activities is a management function. So that's really, the starting point for that. And then as the auditing function really kind of layers onto that. The other thing is people who steal and conceal are usually really, not all of them, not the petty stuff, but some that do significant frauds are usually pretty smart people. And so sometimes you don't catch it in the first year, but hopefully at some point you do catch it because they usually really think through where in the systems that they can actually be able to execute the activity that they're trying to execute without being detected either by management controls or by the auditors. So it's not a perfect answer. We do try our best. We try to achieve what we call reasonable assurance, but it's not absolute assurance.
Well, thank you for that explanation. I have the utmost confidence that our staff are above reproach and that they approach their responsibilities in a very professional, upright manner. So it's good to know, though, that we also have a second thought or a second look at things, and you do your due diligence and ultimately report to council accordingly. So I'm glad to hear that. So thanks for that explanation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Batoye.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner and Mr. Jacobs, for your presentation, and thank you, Mr. Temi Talkper, as well. My first question is, so in your presentation, you said the management override of controls is identified as a significant risk, and you already answered my question, but I just wanted a bit more clarification. Like, how do you test for that risk effect? How do you test for that risk effectively? And you said something about reviewing specific journal entries. However, when I was reading your presentation, it talked about, like, I kind of went into the Clara tool, and it kind of says that it goes through all the journal entries. So is it all the journal entries that are reviewed, or is it just some specific journal entries? Okay. And how do you further test that risk of the management override?
Sure. Through your worship, I'll answer Councillor's question. The risk of override, first of all, it exists in every audit that we do. So it's not like we're picking on the city at all. It's something that we consider on every single audit that we do, and it's required by our professional standards. Journal entries have historically been an area where people have been able to make entries into the accounting records to either boost their earnings or boost revenue. A lot of times it's for personal gain, so where it might increase a bonus that they might receive, or for some reason it might impact their performance review or whatever it might be. We do find that in every organization we start with sort of a risk assessment. And in some organizations, the environment is more ripe for those types of activities. So, for instance, in a public company where they're really under a lot of pressure to meet their earnings every quarter, and if they don't meet their earnings, the analysts, may degrade the stock, or may recommend that people sell stock or hold their stock as opposed to buy stock. It could impact their credit rating for debt financing. So, and a lot of times those organizations, senior executives, have significant bonuses that are tied to the price of the stock. So we always start with looking at the organization. Is it an organization where we would expect to see, or potentially expect to see, somebody in management manipulate the financial results for personal gain? So that's one place we start. Journal entries is a good place because it doesn't go through cash. It doesn't go through a lot of the other checks and balances that organizations have over revenue and over expenditures. So when we do testing of journal entries, we will make decisions. And again, I take the liberty of not sharing exactly all of our audit approach, because there's an element of surprise and an element of unpredictability that we always keep in our audits, so that administration and management isn't fully aware of what we're looking at. But we will look at transactions throughout the course of the year. If we believe that there's transactions that don't look like potentially making sense in the normal course of the business, we will also look at transactions at period end, because at period end, that's when you can have the most significant impact on the results at a point in time. We look at estimates. So estimates are one of these areas where it's not hard and fast. So, if you go out and you buy a pallet of paper and it costs, $300, it's pretty clear. You pay $300 for that pallet of paper. But when you're doing an estimate of something significant, like last year, and we will continue going forward, asset retirement obligations, those estimates, a reasonable estimate can be either A, B, or anything in between. So anytime there's significant estimates that could be tied to a risk of fraud, then we would look at those more closely than if we didn't believe that there would be a fraud risk associated with it. So it really is tailored to the organization, and really focused on looking at unique and odd transactions. You mentioned, Clara, we do have enabling technologies that will run on certain of your data transactions, and the technologies are AI. And I know it's a kind of bit of a buzzword right now, but they are AI enabled, where they'll look at various different transactions to look to see if the transactions make sense. So if you have a credit in a certain account, then the debit should only be in maybe these 3 or 4 different accounts. If it shows up in something that doesn't fall within that population, it highlights it for us, and then we go and we look into it further. So an element of our technology is really looking for exceptions in your reporting. Does that help?
Yeah, it totally does. Thank you very much for your response.
You turned your button off. You did. Okay, your second one.
Okay, my second question is, thank you for your response. My second question is about the required inquiries of those charged with governance. And when I was going through this question, I was like, wait. So you mentioned during your presentation that through your process, you interview administration. And so I'm just looking at this question, and I'm wondering, through your process, is there any option to interview council or one member of council? Is that even something that you do at all in your
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about doing this year actually is sending out a bit of a survey to all the council members that would go through all of these kind of questions, and then give you an opportunity to look at the questions and then to respond to the questions if that would be something of interest. And I think that's a good, efficient way of getting the collective views of council.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. Sheldon, good to see you again. Just as an aside and a follow-up to Councillor Harris's questioning, either on YouTube or Netflix, there's a documentary called All the Queen's Horses. I sent it out to council 6 years ago, and you may have seen it. If not, I'd encourage you to look it up. It's the controller or CFO for a small city somewhere in the United States who over a period of 20 years managed to abscond with in excess of $50 million. The effects on the accounts were so alarming that the CFO from a neighboring community actually wrote council a letter and said, we don't know why you can't fix your roads because we have lots of money. Council liked the CFO. She'd been there forever, and they ignored the letter. Okay, so back to your comments. It's up to council in part to pay attention. She did it by using her friends at the bank where the city dealt. She wandered in one day and opened an account in the name of the city with her as sole signing authority, and then never bothered to put that on the company or on the city's records. And anytime some sort of abnormal stream of cash came in, a special grant or something like that, she would take the money. And nobody was the wiser. The positive of it is, at the end of the day, she was such a successful businessman that when the FBI tallied up the losses, they were able to liquidate their assets and repay the community in full. So the community ended up with a huge windfall at the end of the day. But over a period of several years, a highly embarrassed council and a very justifiably frustrated citizenship. So interesting. So it's well worth watching. I found it interesting. Local authorities pension plan. That's at the request of the LAPP, and you're doing some specified testing just to ensure that, in fact, the city is reporting its employees and filling out the forms and sending the money in appropriately. That's it?
Yes, through your worship. It is a specified auditing engagement. So what happens is local authorities pension gives all the auditors a list of auditing procedures that they want us to perform. And so the procedures are quite detailed, and a lot of it's around ensuring that calculations and reporting are in accordance with the employer manual.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would assume that that's all software driven on behalf of the city at this juncture. In other words, our payroll system's automated, and it's
right.
Just ensuring that the programming is okay. Very small comment. Thank you for sending out your landscape slides in a horizontal format so I don't have to turn my iPad sideways. In materiality, I'm not questioning your judgment or your wisdom at all. I just wonder if 2.8 million doesn't seem high. And I know it doesn't to you because you've already selected the number. It is a large number. It represents somewhere around a third to a half of our free cash flow on an annual basis. You're comfortable with it? And what would it cost if we were to reduce that by half? What impact would that have on your work?
Through your worship, to address Councillor's question, I guess how would I best explain this? When we do the audit, we use the materiality for scoping our work. If we find individual errors or an accumulation of errors that are getting larger, and they don't have to even approach $2.8 million, we would be having the discussion with management that, you know, the accounts need to be corrected. So I would say that the way the audit is scoped, it's scoped in a fashion such that it will capture errors or misstatements less than $2.8 million and has in the past. It's a large organization, right? You've got a lot of transactions, you have a lot of revenue, a large asset base, but and a lot of expenses. We don't want to be so low that we're looking at a lot of small transactions that aren't going to make a difference at the end of the day. I can tell you that roughly 3% of expenses is pretty common across the industry in terms of what my peers are doing in other municipalities. So we're pretty much right in that area. And seeing the inside of the audit, which I do, again, we've had items that have been detected that have been a lot smaller than that over the course of time, and have had those discussions with management. What would be the cost impact if we were to make it half? Not an easy question for me to answer off the top of my head, just because what happens is it's a number that goes into our various sampling routines. And based on our sampling routines, it tells us how many items we actually have to test. So I would have to kind of do a bit of a pro forma and run through some of those sampling routines to get some impact of what that would be. But I would say probably if we were to go half, I would say fees would increase maybe roughly by a third, at least, somewhere in that neighborhood. I mean, it wouldn't be double or multiple times, but it would be a percentage of.
Thank you. And to be clear, I'm not asking you to do that. I was looking for the answer you gave me.
Yeah, sure.
You've already touched on this. It was circled on my slide. The library audit and the group concept. So you actually publish an audited financial statement for the Fort Saskatchewan Public Library, do you not? Yes. And is there any rather small materiality amount applied to that particular audit? So it has its own materiality set and it stands alone as an audit.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, you're good. That looks like all of the questions. So thank you for coming out today and presenting what you're going to be doing. I'm sure Finance is really excited to have you. So thank you very much for being here and showing us what you're going to be up to. And we look forward to the results.
Thank you very much, and those are great questions.
Great. And you are welcome to stay, but I know you'd probably like to leave and get on with business. So
We will. Thank you.
excellent. Okay.
Your Worship, sorry, through to Councillor Gibbs. I just wanted to comment about the fraudulent survey. We do send it out to the mayor. She is the lucky person that gets to fill it out every year, but we can certainly look at sending it out to more council members as well. So I just wanted to add that on there.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Okay. The next one is one card rec pass. And this one also was for information. So we will treat this one the same as we would for Committee of the Whole. So welcome, Brad and Lindsay.
Okay. Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of Council. I'm Lindsay Petra, the supervisor of the Dow Centennial Center, Arenas, and Tourist Field. Joining me this afternoon is Brad Babiak, the Director of Culture and Recreation. The purpose of our presentation today is providing Council with information on the One Card Recreation Pass, the potential of implementing a similar or comparable program while considering the city's existing recreation software, and collection of customer demographic information. Just click. Okay. At the July 2nd, 2024 regular council meeting, a motion was passed that council direct administration to prepare a report outlining options and considerations for implementing a program similar to the Vancouver One Card Recreation Pass, include considerations related to leveraging the city's current recreation software system in order to enable data tracking on such things as recreation user demographic and information on comparable municipal programs in other jurisdictions. A review of the city's current membership program, the Vancouver One Card program, other municipal membership programs, and the information from the city's previous recreation demographic report were used to compile information for today's presentation. Administration has researched the Vancouver's One Card program and similar programs in other municipalities to compare to the Leisure Card. The research aims to understand the potential options available for Fort Saskatchewan. Starting with a summary of the Vancouver One Card, it would be important to note that Vancouver is the only municipality in Canada with an elected board, the Vancouver Board of Parks and Recreation. The board operates 24 community centers with swimming pools, arenas, and playing fields, as well as 250 park spaces and destination gardens. Taking a closer look at the Vancouver One Card program, it provides universal access in a single recreation pass to various facilities and replaces over 20 different membership cards that were previously in use across facilities that the board operates. The One Card is free to obtain. However, patrons need to pay daily admission fees or purchase membership passes to gain access to the facilities. Patrons are not required to swipe the One Card when accessing facilities paying the daily drop-in admission. The One Card can be loaded with various pass options, which include 1, 3, or 12-month passes, and additionally 10 visit passes can also be added to the card. The Leisure Access Program is linked to the Vancouver One Card for qualified applicants, providing free or discounted services to residents. Next, a review of regional municipalities was also completed. A more detailed comparison can be found in Appendix B of the report. The review found that municipalities offer comparable membership options and facility access with past programs. For example, the City of Edmonton offers Value and Benefits Plus memberships that provide access to 20 different leisure and recreation centers. Daily drop-in admissions can be paid directly at the facility, and no pass is required to access the facility if patrons are paying that fee type. The Leisure Access Program is linked to the City of Edmonton's passes for qualified residents, and Edmonton memberships are limited to city-owned and operated facilities and do not include other facilities within the city limits. The City of Fort Saskatchewan's Leisure Card is similar to the One Card, offering flexible access to facilities. Services include 10 visit passes, monthly and annual memberships at the specific facilities, and multi-facility memberships. Daily drop-in admissions can also be paid to access Harbor Pool and the Dow Centennial Center. However, the Leisure Card is not required for this admission type. The Leisure Card is limited to city-owned and operated facilities. Leisure Cards are issued to qualified access for everyone program applicants. And the most significant difference between the Leisure Card program and the Vancouver One Card is the ability to access facilities across the larger region without additional memberships. Implementing a program similar to Vancouver's One Card in Fort Saskatchewan requires careful consideration of several factors. Research on Vancouver's program and similar initiatives in other municipalities has informed these considerations. Population, facility size, and scope are important to keep in mind when comparing the two systems. Vancouver One Card is designed for a large urban population, with numerous facilities. Fort Saskatchewan, being smaller, may not have that extensive of a system. The current recreation software system allows access to both the Dow Centennial Center and Harbor Pool, expanding this to include other facilities such as the golf course or additional community centers could enhance the program's value. However, will require additional costs and stakeholder consultation to determine feasibility and implications. The second consideration is the current technology and data management. The existing recreation software is used by the City of Fort Saskatchewan is referred to as Intelli. This system does have strong foundation for tracking specific data sets related to the facility usage. Collecting and analyzing user data can help tailor services and identify trends, improving overall user experience and operational efficiency. Partnerships and regional collaboration is another factor to consider. Unlike larger municipalities with multiple partnerships, City of Fort Saskatchewan currently lacks regional collaborations for recreation services. exploring potential partnerships with nearby municipalities or private operators could expand the program's reach and resources. Collaborative agreements would allow residents to access facilities within the region, enhancing the program's appeal. However, this would require additional costs and stakeholder consultation to determine feasibility and the implications. Marketing and communication engagement would also play a necessary role in any changes to the current program. Awareness campaigns and effective communication strategies would be essential to inform residents about a new program, its benefits, and how to use it. This could include community meetings, social media campaigns, and informational sessions at local facilities. To ensure continuous improvement of any program and to address any issues, establishing channels for user feedback would need to be considered. Financial considerations would be dependent on the scope and scale of the program change. A cost-benefit analysis would need to occur in order to understand the financial implications of implementing a unified card system beyond our city-operated facilities. This should include the initial setup costs, ongoing maintenance, and potential revenue from increased facility usage. The city could explore grants or funding opportunities from provincial or federal programs that support recreational infrastructure and community health initiatives. By considering these factors, Fort Saskatchewan can strengthen the recreation pass system to meet the needs of its residents while leveraging successful elements of the Vancouver One Card program. The last part is about tracking the data with our using current software. So the city uses IntelliManager software to collect data for registered programs, recreation memberships, and daily drop-in admissions. The current client profiles in Intelli collect typical contact information, date of birth, which is currently optional for adults, and resident information. Additionally, anyone with a facility membership or program registration has a customer profile in Intelli. Drop-in admissions provide general age category data such as child, adult, senior, but not exact age or the address of the participant. Patrons are not required to have a leisure card to pay the drop-in admission. While mandatory registration in Intelli could provide us with more data, it could be seen as a barrier to facility access. There is a potential to enhance the data collection the following ways. Adding mandatory age categories for adults and seniors could improve the data without being too intrusive. Collecting addresses could help with planning and understanding catchment areas, and custom reports could be developed. Some key findings from the collection of customer demographic information report included in Appendix A are: the Dow Centennial Centre has 15% daily admissions and 85% membership passes are used, while Harbour Pool has 70% daily admissions and 30% membership passes. Current membership and program registration data is sufficient for operational insights. Children and youth are a significant portion of the facility users. It's recommended that parental permission is obtained for data collection from minors. In conclusion, enhancing data tracking with Intelli can provide valuable insight for operational improvements and future planning. Some of this work is already underway through the Intelli support position approved during the 2024 budget deliberations. And now I will take any questions.
Okay, thank you. I'll start with the first question. So what I'm hearing is for the size of the city of Fort Saskatchewan and the amenities that we currently have within our control, it's working?
Yeah, so your worship, it would be the pass system that we currently have would be similar to like other municipalities and essentially the Vancouver One Card. However, based on our size, we only have so many facilities within the city facilities list at this time. So
okay, and I guess my second question, to investigate anything further that goes beyond our region, when you talk about Vancouver, you're talking about that they have an elected board that would set the fees and everything that surrounds their facilities?
Yeah, so your worship, that would be correct.
Okay, and I guess my only comment on that is I probably wouldn't want any more work done on that. We spent, 2 or 3 years on trying to get a transit up and running, and we couldn't even get agreement amongst amongst the members on something as simple as transit. So I can't even imagine with different fees and schedules and things we could have success with that. So personally, I wouldn't want to expend any more energy on it. Councillor Kelly?
Thank you. It was my request that this work be done, and thank you for providing it. My concern when I made the request was that it seems, and it still seems to me, that the city is not doing a particularly great job in defining who uses and on what terms and et cetera, the demographic data around the usership of the facilities. And let me drive this point home for one last time. I'm going to get a hark us back to a year now, almost 2 years ago, when the first of 3 reports was issued to council from the consulting group. And part of that report was a community survey to try to ascertain the desire and usage level of our pool facilities within the community. Their survey was so flawed. It reported back that 3% of the population, in fact, stated in the survey that they used the pool a total of 4 times the annual usage of the pool. I'm trusting my memory, it might have only been 3. Nonetheless, the data was extremely skewed and flawed, and it was my opinion at that time that the city should have the data to make that survey not necessary. And when it gets to the pool, and this is just one example, pool because that was a hot topic of the day. Could be an ice arena, could be a racquetball court, I don't care. Any facility. Is it 3% of the population using it 100,000 visits, or is it 100,000 of the population, or pardon me, 30,000 of the population using it 3 visits per year? Basic data like that changes my opinion as a councillor on how I view various projects. Throughout the time that I've talked about this, and it has now been years, administration has referred to the ability of Intelli, but I've not seen any data from it. I don't know what you collect. I don't know what you could produce to council, and the pool decision has already been made, but I don't recall seeing any data from that pool that would help me understand who in the community used the pool and to what level. So I'm going to leave it at that. I continue to be frustrated by the reproach because I think you're imagining something far more difficult than I am. On my keychain, I have a little fob like this that the library card, it was a library card issued by the folks in the library. It literally took them a minute and a half. And I have it on and I can walk into the library. All I need to do, and what the library should consider doing, is putting a turnstile in so I actually have to flash it when I go in there. Then they could actually count their visits. And I think we would find that their visits are, if we counted their visits, their usage would be much higher than council believes it is. So I'm not imagining anything complicated, adult, youth, or child, period. Vancouver has no problem with collecting that data for children. I fail to see why we should have a problem with it or make it a problem. I'm looking for something simple. Anyway, the pool decision has been made. My concern and the comments came out of those deliberations through council, and I'll let it rest at this particular juncture. Thanks for the report.
Okay, Councillor Harris.
Councillor Kelly, I understand your concerns, and I think getting data on use probably is a useful thing from a planning standpoint. As probably the only member of council who has a leisure card, other than perhaps. Well, I'm really glad to hear it because I never see you guys there. But bottom line is, as a member who has a card, I see value in it. I swipe it every time I go into the facility. You could probably tell me how many times I've been in the facility. Probably just the Dow in the last year, correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Harris, that would be correct.
Exactly. So then I'm not sure how you would correlate that with any sort of demographic data other than I used it X number of times. Or Councillor Abatoye, if you wanted to know how many members of council did that. So, and it's a little card, kind of like what you're talking about, or a big one if you want to keep it in your bag. And I swipe it every time I go in. Now, the interesting thing is I have a membership and I haven't paid for the pool. So if I went and tried to swipe that at the pool, it would say that I don't have a paid admission requirement for the pool, correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Harris, that would also be correct.
Exactly. So we get around the whole issue of people paying for what they are intending to use. From that standpoint, I think what we're doing presently makes a lot of sense. We have cards. We can give those to people who want to use it as a convenience. And I think it works eminently perfectly as far as I'm concerned. And it allows me to get in and out. It allows me to get a good rate. If I choose to buy over an annual pass as opposed to a monthly pass or a daily pass. So I think it's working fine. I can't see the one card making much sense, but I think you've provided that information today. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Abatoye.
Thank you for your presentation. My first question is, why do you think that the daily passes for the pool is so skewed towards the daily admission compared to the DCC? I think your mic is off. Okay, perfect. Oh, yeah. No, you're good.
Sorry, through your worship to Councillor Abatoye, I think it's just the trend, like based on what people would pay. So they would normally have come for the weekend for family swim, that type of thing. I don't know if Brad has anything else to add.
Through your worship, Council Abatoye. Yeah, the other thing that we found in the previous demographics report was when that stat is particular to spontaneous use. So a large number of those are children and youth. I believe at the age is 8 years old or 9 years old and above, you can go to the pool as a child and access this. This is one of the things we did previously was look at, and again, rough numbers, approximately 2,700 visits in that we did a pilot. And of those 2,700 visits, approximately like 1,600 were children and youth. And so again, we didn't collect information from those, again, due to the privacy requirements or recommended guidelines. So I think it's partially the clientele of the pool being children and youth and them not necessarily having memberships per se, but more coming for the spontaneous use piece. I think it's also again, what we currently offer at the Harbor Pool is we offer either kind of lessons or spontaneous. Rarely both are able to be done at once. So most of the kids would be registered in programs and they would be covered and in the system that way. But from a spontaneous use thing, they're just literally, it's probably one of the few places that we have that still use cash in terms of loonies and toonies from the children to access our loony and toonie swims. And so I think those all play into why the demographic looks so different at the pool as opposed to necessarily at the DCC.
Okay, that makes sense. So as long as you're 8 and above, you can access the pool by yourself. You don't need your parents to be there. Okay, I can understand that challenge. And I really understand also from the perspective of Councillor Kelly and just the data, because, you know, I mean, data is very valuable. However, I see why the one card pass will not be, you know, it wouldn't help. I mean, it wouldn't help us just because I'm just looking at the cost versus the benefits, right? You know, the returns on investment, I think it's just not going to, you know, make sense for our community. And so I think that what we currently have, we can continue to use that, or maybe we can find ways that we can get more of that information. And so maybe that's just collecting people's postal code, so that helps to know what area of the city they live in. And you already collect their age range. Is that correct?
Through your worship to
And this
Councillor
is specifically for the pool, because I know that with the DCC you have a significant number of data for that one, but for the pool.
Yeah, so the information that we would have from both places is from Intelli, so it would collect the same information for both facilities. Sorry, just thinking back to that.
So for spontaneous use, you don't get any data. They just pay and then go in.
Yeah, so the data that we through your worship, we would have. The data will be collected for just the age range. So if they paid child admission, we would collect child admission rates for that.
Okay.
or how many children came in that day.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And through your worship, the council, I would tell you, just supplement that briefly to just speak to, yeah, we wouldn't be collecting the personal data, but ultimately any access to our facility typically has a fees and charge unless there's a fully sponsored swim. So we would be able to break down the number of children, youth, or whatever that access our facility in a year. I think referring to kind of some of the data that we'd like to correlate with would be we are not able to say if that one child came to 10 swims or 10 kids came to 10 unique swims through the spontaneous use. But as Councillor Harris alluded to, with the membership, we are able to say what facility they came to and how often. And if it was a multi-pass, we could say how often an individual went to the DCC versus Harbor Pool. So I think we do have the ability to collect some of the information. I think it's just we haven't fully understood council's intent around trying to get some of the numbers. And so now that we do, I think we can look at a combination of revisits versus individuals to a limited ability, again, being limited by spontaneous use. And then, of course, we just want to qualify that that's not the entire data set because we're not collecting all of that information. But we do have the ability to look a little closer. And as we've have the Intelli position from that council approved previously, we are looking at some kind of different custom reports and stuff we can do so we can give thought to what are we able to report from that and noting the limitations on it. So those are things we do internally to look at the numbers, but if council's interested in something like that, we could look at even through the T1 or T2 reporting, some of those at a high level information.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nguyen.
Thanks for the report and kind of going down the rabbit hole of access passes and data collection. A couple questions. You mentioned that there could be further barriers to entry with more data collection required or asking more data. What do you mean by that? What could be the barrier to entry or preclude someone from accessing a facility by obtaining that?
Your worship, through to Councillor Nguyen, one way that it could be seen as a barrier is that you typically for collecting information from children, so say they were coming to pay the drop-in admission, we would kind of have to have the parent information to be able to collect their information. So we couldn't just issue the child a card necessarily. They would have to have an adult linked to their account. So if their adult would not like to sign up or won't come and sign the paperwork, then to issue the card. And that would be similar to the Vancouver One card. They would also be required to have, they actually even have on the website, like print out this permission slip prior to coming to the facility for your card.
Right, so it's a little bit of red tape in a way for, okay, thank you. And that's what I thought it was, but I didn't think, or I didn't know if it was further than that, it went further than that. I think it was St. Albert. I visited a pool a long time ago, and they just asked for a postal code. I think you mentioned, obtaining an address is one of the one of the ideas. But like, could we start asking for postal code, or even just asking, hey, what city or town do you live in, and just for added information, demographic information?
Through your worship to Councillor Nguyen, there is no barrier from us doing that. I think again, we just want to be purposeful. Again. For what we intend to use the information for. So it's not that we can't ask for it. We just want to be very purposeful and share with the community why are we asking for this information. So as we indicated, much like the address, if we just ask for postal codes, it's to help, like if we feel it's important to recognize where people are coming from in our community, or even more so from outside the community, that's absolutely something we can ask for. And again, at an appropriate level, it might not seem as intrusive as your street address or that level of information. Similar with birth, as we mentioned, potentially birth category or age ranges, as opposed to birth dates. It's a less intrusive to say, are you 24 to 36 versus what's your birth date, and getting that kind of level of detail. So again, if we don't need that level of detail, we don't necessarily have to ask for it. But from a marketing perspective, we do recognize there's probably quite a significant difference between a 25-year-old versus a 60-year-old, but right now we have adult. And so that's all the information we have for our marketing and other pieces. So yeah, there is definitely some potential benefits of asking for some of that additional information at the appropriate level, that it doesn't become too burdensome for people or perceived to be a burden to people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for your response. I have a couple more questions I can go back on.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Macon?
Thank you. I just have a comment, I guess. I would think that it makes sense to ask spontaneous use users who are adults to make a membership in the system, like make a profile so that we have that information. I would think it would allow us to collect the demographic information, but I also think that there's some consideration on, you know, who is using our facility. I don't think it's inappropriate to understand who is using our space. But I would say that it does make sense that there are some considerations around kids and what you had mentioned before. I would think that if they came in alone and didn't have a profile, that we would allow them to come in and pay for a spontaneous use. But I don't think there's any reason why an adult can't, the first time they come, create a profile and then it be paid under that profile. Is that something the system can't do? Like, I don't know, if you had a membership, if you had a profile, can you not just come in and pay for a drop-in?
Through your worship to Councillor Macon, right now, yeah, if you had a profile, you could just still pay the daily admission. The only difference would be is that you would be swiping your pass and then also paying the drop-in fee at the same time. So it kind of just adds an element of to the admission that wasn't necessarily there before. So I think we did on the last report. Did we not? We had some implications for that for staffing if we required everyone to have a membership card to enter the facilities.
And then one thing I guess I don't understand about the Intelli system is like how versatile of a system is it as far as reporting? I don't understand the information, like the reports that we can get. Like, to what extent can we ask the system to provide us reports? Like, can we ask it to print something that shows every age range and every type of service that they've scanned into for a year, and then it will print that? Or does anything like that consider or require a lot of work to bring that together?
Through your worship, the council Macon. So there are a number of reports that are already built into Intelli as a standard deliverable it provides. What we have actually done is work with Intelli to develop custom reports. So again, this comes to what's the purpose of what we want the information for, and then we design a report that pulls the relevant information, and it, more importantly, excludes the other information that's not relevant. That was actually a huge chunk of the initial work around our Intelli project position, is because many times it would be our staff having to pull 3 or 4 reports and reconciling them to come up with a number. And what we've done is now gone back to Intelli and developed a custom report. So that now isn't how we do it. We can now just run a report. So once we know what it is we're looking for, to your point about specific dates, ranges, whatever it is, if the existing report doesn't exist, there is the ability to customize it. There is some cost with that going back to Intelli, but our IT department has been working to get some expertise to do some custom reports on a smaller scale themselves. So again, it just we just need to know exactly what variables we want to look at and then develop the appropriate report to pull that. And that should be possible based on what's in the fields. Just as a reminder though, part of the Intelli project was to actually go into Intelli and clean up some things that weren't implemented necessarily the best way. So there is some data cleanup, and some of that will limit our ability to go back in the past if we've had to make changes. So very long answer to yes, we can do some of that, but we have to be very purposeful in knowing what our intention is before we develop the report.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm top of the speaking order again. So I guess my comment would be, and I know I worked at the Christmas market this year, and people, when they come, they want to pay, they want to get in. They don't want to be asked a bunch of questions. Even asking if they're a senior or not is like, you know, almost invasive to people. You know, so I think it's really about keeping it simple. I think it's just, okay, we had so many people show up, and if you can, you know, get their age categories based on what they're paying for, I think that's personally all the information. I think if you start getting into too much and you've got a mom standing there with 2 or 3 kids, now all of a sudden you're asking her to do a whole bunch of filling something out rather than she wants to slap her $20 down on the table and say, well, here, I just want to get in and get going. I think if you make it too complicated, then people just throw their hands in the air and say, don't bother. So I just say be really cautious with that, because I know just my experience, maybe even taking cash at the Christmas market, it's like just, here's my $2, I'm out of here, I want to get going. And if I asked them any more questions, they would just get frustrated. So that's just my comments. Councillor Nguyen?
Yeah, thanks again. Just yeah, on the topic, I think it mentioned briefly like there could be an opportunity for kind of intermunicipal partnership access passes. This is maybe kind of looking into the future question, but you know we're going to have Bremner and Cambring growing close to us. I think there's some rec facilities planned for there. Has there ever been discussions with say Strathcona County or any other regional or proximity or close proximity regions to partner with an access pass, or would there be any benefit to that? And I guess I think about maybe Leduc and Beaumont. Do they have anything going on, or is that a model that would be explored?
I'm going to go to Mr. Fleming. He can answer this one.
Through your worship, it's definitely come up before and been explored. I know when we were in kind of the height of COVID there actually for a while. And then I think even before that through the IMRC committee, we actually had some periods of time where we were allowing free access for our citizens to go in either direction. My recollection was that went on for about 3 months, and it wasn't, there wasn't a lot of uptake. It was related mostly to allowing the membership. If you have a membership in one, you could use it in the other. And the amount of use was surprisingly low. And I think that was one of the reasons why it wasn't pursued any further. Folks who get, like, let's say you're Councillor Harris and you've got your membership and your daily routine, we weren't finding people would vary from that a lot, even when they had the ability to go to other places. So the short answer to the question was yes, it was discussed and explored and trialed for a short period of time.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that answer. And then I think this was kind of discussed briefly during budget, but there's going to be obviously on modified user fees and access pass types when the pool is built at the DCC. What are we looking forward to seeing when that pool is built and an access card for the more multi-use facility at that time?
Through your worship to Councillor Nguyen. Yeah, as I briefly indicated at budget, that is work that we're undertaking this year in advance of coming back with the validation study to further do the analysis of what our proposed approach would be around some fees and charges related to that new facility and whether it's a one pass for the whole facility or not. As Councillor Harris indicated, he might not be interested in that pool piece, and so we'd have to see what the financial impacts are or considerations are to force people to buy something at a fee that gives them full access, even though they don't necessarily want it. So we're not willing to commit to what that is right now, but we are committed to doing that work in advance of the conversation on the phase 2 pool approval.
Okay, and so when are we going to be seeing that back? Or do we know? I'm just curious, are we going to see it in this term?
I think at this point or if I recall correctly from what Mr. Fraser said, early 2026, I believe, is what the proposed timeline is for the validation to be done.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly on round 2.
Thank you. Brad, your comments about trying to use the Intelli and taking a lot of labor to combine and digest and skim out the reports is exactly what, it's those sorts of comments exactly that cause me to think there must be a simpler system. I still firmly believe there's a simpler system. We just haven't tried to find it yet. And I understand that people always perceive their time and are running short. I get it. People don't like to be disturbed or distracted or held up. But I do draw a distinction between somebody entering for a $2 pass to a farmer's market or the Christmas market or something like that. There's a distinction there, in my mind, as a counselor and a citizen and a taxpayer, to a citizen that's voting for a new pool. And as a counselor, we're looking at a $50 or $55 million expenditure for the pool. And I'd like to be able to see data on what percentage of the unique percentage of the population uses the pool and what unique percentage of use each of break that down between regular and frequent and irregular, so I can see at what percentage of the pool use is comprised of what percentage of the population. You couldn't give us that data. The survey couldn't give us that data. It attempted to, but it grossly exaggerated and in fact was grossly misleading. I found it offensive. Had we had that data, administration would have caught that error in that report before it got published. And does it have to be complicated? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I'm going to leave it. Thank you. I would hope that when it comes before some future council, the next $50 million build for a rec or a culture facility, or for any facility for that matter, that there's the data available for that council, and that this to allow them to make a better and more informed decision. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Avatoye.
Just a confirmation. So currently, when people get the membership, do they enter the information themselves? Like, are they, like, I know, like, when you go to certain facilities, you're just able to enter it in an iPad yourself, so you kind of makes it quicker. Is that the process, or is it done at the back of the counter?
So through your worship, right now it's done by the customer service staff. Okay. Enter that information into the system.
Okay.
You can also create accounts online, but we do find that there's lots of duplication where we have to consolidate the accounts and stuff afterwards. So.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I mean, I think there's value in what has been said, right? But again, it just comes down to the cost versus the benefit. So, and I think that's Mr. Bediak has said so many times about what exactly are we trying to really achieve from this data. I think that's really important for us to figure out what we're trying to achieve, and then we can figure out how to get there. But yeah, no, I support the current system as is. We can figure out how we want to do that in the future as we build the pool. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That looks like all the questions. So thank you for the report and the information. I have been asked for a small comfort break. So it's 3:12. So how about 8 minutes, and we'll be back in our seats at 3:20. Okay, we will resume the meeting and we are on item 6.2, bylaw C11-24, responsible pet ownership for third reading. Corrine Rayner and presenting. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of Council. My name is Corrine Rayner and I'm the Director of Protective Services. Supporting me today is Sergeant Ben Sharp, our Municipal Enforcement Supervisor. We are here to request third reading of the Responsible Pet Ownership Bylaw C11-24. We first presented the proposed changes to Council at the June 18th Committee of the Whole meeting. Feedback was received and a request to provide more information on the merits of animal licensing and the city resources required for the administration and enforcement of the animal licensing requirement, as well as a second report on the management of cats in the community. On September the 17th, this information was presented to Council with a recommendation to remove the animal licensing requirement from the bylaw and replace that with an identification tag. On November the 12th, the Responsible Pet Ownership Bylaw received 2 readings, and we are here today to request third reading. We do have one amending motion to request to section 4.8 of the bylaw. We did correct a typo within the bylaw, and the 2 yellow highlighted words are the things that have changed within that section. So section 4.8 now reads, section 4.7 may not apply in the sole discretion of a peace officer if the dog, nuisance dog, restricted dog or cat threatens, chases, attacks, harasses, or injures. We've removed the word kills from that section. So, and then it goes on to say a trespasser on the property where its owner resides, a person who is physically abusing or provoking the animal, a dog, nuisance dog, restricted dog, or cat that intrudes onto the property. The intent behind this section is to allow officers the discretion to avoid laying a fine on an animal owner if circumstances supported it. For example, if a trespasser comes onto my property and my dog Bentley attacks them, in protection of our property or myself, this section will allow the peace officer the discretion, depending on the result of the investigation, to look at the merits of issuing fines to the animal owners. So we did remove the word kills, as it is an extreme offense, and typically if an animal killed a person, the RCMP would do that investigation. So that is the reason why we removed that. So administration recommends that Council proceed to third reading, and that is the conclusion of our presentation, and we thank you for your time.
Thank you. So I'll open it up to any questions, if anybody has any. If not, what is the wish of Council? Councillor Harris?
I would move that Council amend section 4.8 of the Responsible Pet Ownership Bylaw C11-24 to read as follows. Section 4.7 may not apply in the sole discretion of the peace officer if the dog, nuisance dog, restricted dog, or cat threatens, chases, attacks, harasses, or injures A, a trespasser on the property where the owner resides, B, a person who is physically abusing or provoking the animal, or C, a dog, nuisance dog, restricted dog, or cat that intrudes onto the property.
Thank you. I'll accept that motion. Would you like to speak to it?
No, I think that's it's a reflection on the comments that we made at the last meeting, and I think that's constant quality improvement to make sure that the legislation we put in place addresses concerns going forward. So I'm not a dog guy, but I respect the fact that this will hopefully clarify that situation.
Okay, thank you. This is open for discussion and debate. Not seeing anything on close? Okay, the motion is now closed. Please cast your vote. And that is carried, and you can continue on.
I would move that we give third reading to the Responsible Pet Ownership Bylaw C11-24 as amended.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak to it?
No.
Thank you. It's open for discussion and debate. Not seeing any. I'm going to close the motion. Please cast your vote. And that is carried. Thank you very much. And Look forward to the new bylaw. All right, so item 7.1, changing December 10th meeting date was done by consensus, and 7.2, canceling November 28th budget meeting was done by consensus. So we will go on to number 8.1, bylaw C22-24, elections bylaw for 3 readings.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Sandy Bajaya, the General Manager for Corporate Services, and I'm very pleased to bring this report to you. I'm presenting on behalf of Legislative Services and our Director, Andrew Kaiser, who unfortunately can't be here today. This report provides Council with an updated elections bylaw. As Council is well aware, municipal elections in Alberta are governed through provincial legislation, but certain matters must be addressed by municipal bylaw. The main provincial act that sets out the framework for elections is the Local Authorities Election Act, or LAEA. In 2024, the province introduced changes to the LAEA through the Municipal Affairs Statutes Amendment Act, which was formerly known as Bill 20. Aside from the need to update the city's elections bylaw because of those changes to the Act, a review of this bylaw ahead of the next general municipal election is a governance best practice and something we typically do once per term. Over the next few slides, I will highlight the changes being proposed to the bylaw. Just before I speak to the changes, I will also note that the report has a few attachments to help the reader with the bylaw changes. Appendix A is a clean version of the proposed bylaw. Appendix B is an annotated version of the bylaw that highlights the changes. And Appendix C is the current version that exists today. So I'll now turn to the new proposed elections bylaw and go over the changes. The changes to the definitions section are truly housekeeping in nature. Generally, we have removed terms that are already defined in the LAEA. This is a legislative best practice, and we have clarified or added terms that were required. In terms of the provisions related to nominations, there are some new provisions added to the bylaw, and these address options that are now available to municipalities as a result of the changes to the LAEA. The bylaw now includes a requirement for candidates to include a criminal record check as part of their nomination package. This kind of change aligns with greater accountability and transparency. Administration generally supports having this requirement. However, Council may choose to forego this change since it's discretionary in nature. The second new requirement is that of a nomination deposit. Here too, administration generally supports having a nomination deposit, but we've chosen the lowest value deposit. So we can put in $100 to $1,000. We've opted for $100. And this is just to ensure that when people put their nomination package in, there's been some thought and consideration of that commitment. The deposit is refundable under certain conditions. So if the candidate is elected, if they withdraw within a certain time frame, or if they receive the same number of votes as the, 50% of the lowest votes of the person who's successful. But just to reiterate, Council has the ability to remove this requirement if it's desirable. The next set of provisions relates to voting stations, and this simply allows the city to open voting stations earlier than the mandatory start time of 10 a.m. Administration believes that 9 a.m. would be a manageable time frame and allow greater flexibility for voters. This provision would not impact the opportunities for advance votes. This would just apply to Election Day. The next set of changes deals with the advanced voting and ballots. Here we have simply removed sections related to electronic ballot tabulators since those are no longer allowed, and we've expanded the use of special ballots. So special ballots can now be requested by anyone eligible to vote in the municipal election. We have also provided authorization for counting certain ballots a little bit earlier in the evening. So this means that the count can start at 7:30 for certain ballots. The remainder of the amendments to the bylaw are a little more housekeeping in nature. So just to give you a quick summary, we've removed provisions that duplicate what is already set out in the Local Authorities Election Act. We've removed any of the administrative details since those are not required to be set out in the bylaw, and we've made other housekeeping cleanups. So the city must have its elections bylaw in place by December 31st, 2024. As explained earlier, Council has a few options in terms of its next steps here today. If Council is satisfied with the proposed elections bylaw as presented, then Council may wish to give the bylaw all 3 readings this evening. If Council would like to see changes to the elections bylaw, such as removing the need for a criminal record check or removing the requirement for a nomination deposit, then Council can amend the proposed bylaw and then give the bylaw readings as amended. And with that, I will turn the floor over to the chair, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got Councillor Harris first.
Mr. Bajia, so relative to the criminal record check, so if we actually left it in there, which I don't necessarily support because I'm not sure if it's all that useful, what happens if somebody presents a criminal record check shows they were convicted of an indictable offense, obviously that then, whatever, is the returning officer then empowered to reject or to not accept the nomination form of that individual?
So it's a little...
And what happens with that information? Does it become part of the public record, in other words?
So thank you, Councillor Harris, through the mayor to Councillor Harris. So I'll take your question in parts. So the city would not be able to redact very much information provided in a criminal record check that's set out in the Local Authorities Election Act. So it is a FOIPable record and anyone can make a request for that record and it would be provided. There are some details we would be obligated to redact in terms of address and phone number, but generally the substance of it would be available to the public upon request. In terms of indictable offense, it would really depend. There are certain offenses under the criminal code that would disqualify you from running for council, but there are many that would not. So it would really depend on the situation, and the returning officer would need to review the situation. And if it was an offense that would disqualify the candidate, they would inform the candidate of that situation, and then there would be a subsequent steps taken from that point on.
So are we planning to ensure that whoever is appointed as the returning officer has the necessary background experience to be able to make that type of a determination?
Through the mayor to Councillor Harris, yes, that's absolutely critical to have a returning officer who's well versed in the Local Authorities Election Act. Our Director of Legislative Services would be our returning officer. So that is material that he is well acquainted with.
Okay. Second question. I had noted that there is a provision under the LEAA to actually allow for the printing of ballots and lots, and I raised that issue. I was intending to raise it in the last election, but I didn't for a number of reasons. Now that hasn't been put in there, but that has been in the legislation for many, many years. And some municipalities have chosen to do that. Have you had any experience with the printing of ballots and lots? In other words, by alternating alphabetical names so that no one name is at the top of all ballots?
Through the mayor to Councillor Harris, thank you for that question. You did give us some advance notice, so I did have an opportunity to review the act, and I am familiar with the provisions. I have not experienced that firsthand myself, but it does seem like it is, certainly something that would be feasible. My recommendation to council would be to direct administration to prepare a report on the feasibility, just to give us a little bit of time to look at that matter a little more thoroughly. And it would be a very easy amendment to the elections bylaw if council wished to pursue that. We would need to have that amendment in place 2 months ahead of the election. So we do have the gift of time. And that is something I think administration would be happy to investigate further if you were of a mind to make that motion.
Yeah, given that I've raised this issue as a potential amendment to the existing bylaw wording that you brought forward, I'd be prepared to move that in an appropriate time. I asked the question about the record check and the deposit. I'm not necessarily believing that a $100 deposit is going to stop somebody from being a silly bugger if they want to, in terms of running an ineffective campaign. That's personal choice. And I'm not sure $100 would do that. And in the past, we haven't. I think larger municipalities might, but most smaller municipalities or mid-sized cities of our size don't. And so I'm not necessarily interested in doing that or imposing the criminal record check either. I think if somebody does want to run and if they get elected, I think that's really up to the electorate to make an issue of that in due course. So I'm not supportive of either one, but I'm prepared to make the amendment to bring forward, as you say, appropriate information for council consideration for that potential change.
Okay, thank you. Just for my information, that would be a notice of motion at the end of the meeting.
To the mayor, it would be a germane motion to make as part of this report, so it could just be a subsequent motion after we deal with the bylaw if council is willing to do that.
Okay, so if you have something written up by the time we get to the end, okay. Okay, thank you. Councillor Macon.
Thank you. What is the reason the province gives for allowing municipalities to request a deposit? What is their reasoning for that?
It's something through the mayor to Councillor Macon. It is something that the province, during its engagement sessions with various stakeholders, heard as feedback, and they're saying that they're responding to. So I think my understanding is the intention is to add a little bit of rigor and sober second thought to someone before they just put their name in for council. It's a pretty serious undertaking to run for council. You would hope that people do their due diligence, but they're adding one additional tool in the toolbox, if you will.
Okay. And then just looking at how this is written, then the city is not recommending any sort of refund for any reason, because that is not in here. At least I didn't see it.
The refund is in the LAEA, so all of those details are set out. So anyone who is elected automatically gets a refund. If you withdraw, you get a refund. If the candidate dies, the refund is returned to the estate. Or if you get at least 50% of the votes that the person with the least number of votes who was successful, you also get a refund.
Okay, so we don't control that part of it.
No, that is all set out in the Local Authorities Election Act.
Okay, I'll have comments on debate, then I'll wait. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'm next in the speaking order. So I guess when we talk about sober second thoughts and really thinking it through, do you not believe that person having to download the form, going out and getting 5 signatures isn't some thought process? Because I guess I would question, rather than a deposit, wouldn't it be better to have more signatures?
You're quite right. That is another option that would be open to council to increase the number of signatures. I think both are options available to council. Ultimately, it's truly at council's discretion what they want to see in the bylaw.
Okay, so then just procedurally, once we get a motion put on the floor, then if council wants to debate taking those out, it's just an amending motion to remove them?
Correct. In the alternative section of the report, we do have the potential motions drafted to remove either the criminal record check, the deposit, or both.
Okay.
So those are prepared should council wish to go that way.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure procedurally, once we get to that point, that I've got that. Councillor Nguyen, you're next.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate Councillor Harris's opening remarks here. I had some questions similar. I mean, obviously the two things that we can change are the deposit and CRC. The rest is fairly set in stone. I was at a volleyball tournament this past weekend. It was a fundraiser for FCSS, and it was all protective services RCMP bylaw. I got into a casual conversation, and actually my wife and I just had criminal record checks done for vulnerable sector with young kids, being coaches and volunteers. So I went back and looked at our criminal record checks, and there's about 3 boxes on there that can be ticked. If somebody had a criminal record, all it says on that document is possible match. So I asked the question, if somebody had a criminal record, all it says is possible match. It doesn't show that it's an indictable offense, or you can't, or you're excluded from running under the MGA as well. So what has to happen at that point is you have to make a declaration, I believe I was told. So a declaration would have to be made to the city, and then you'd have to go back to the RCMP and indicate that you've done so. My question is, how does that process play out if there is somebody that has like a positive hit on that? And then so how much information is going to be published, and what needs to be done from that point on, where we can actually say that, this individual can't run or shouldn't be running, or
Through the mayor to Councillor Nguyen, it's a good question, but I need to clarify. The criminal record check is a component of the nomination package. We are not, as a city, surveilling or vetting potential candidates. So if we keep this requirement in and someone submits their nomination package and they fail to provide a criminal record check within 1 month of when they submit, their nomination package would not be accepted. We do not take the information and do anything with it. We just confirm that it's there. And the individual applying to be a candidate must sign the declaration that they are eligible to be a candidate. So that becomes a record of the municipality. If a member of the public wishes to review that criminal record check, we would then be required to provide the criminal record check. That's all that we would have authority over. We are not investigating candidates in any way, shape, or form. So I just want to clarify that detail. It is another thing that one must provide when they submit their nomination package.
Okay, thank you for that answer. It says, the wording says a basic criminal record check or basic police information check, one or the other. Is there a difference between those two?
I think it may just be called different things depending on which RCMP station you're using or what terminology staff use. I'm not sure what the difference is. I think they're equivalent is my understanding, but I'd have to double check that.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Kelly.
Mayor Catcher, I sense that some members of council and perhaps myself as well want to talk about possible amendments. So with that in mind, I'm prepared to make move first reading if you're so inclined.
Yep. If you'd like to put first reading on,
Okay.
And then we, okay.
Because I know you had a question. Okay, thank you. In that case, I move the council give first reading to elections bylaw C-2224.
Okay, thank you very much. Would you like to speak to the motion?
No, I want to speak to possible amendments. I'm going to open it up to the floor, Mayor Catcher, and weigh in my turn. Thanks.
Okay, so first reading is on for discussion and debate, and just procedurally, we need to pass that before we take amendments, correct?
You could amend a proposed bylaw, but either way is absolutely fine.
Okay, just double checking. Okay, Councillor Harris?
So let's go back to the nomination period. So nomination period is included in the legislation, and there's a requirement. And if this bylaw passes, then certain things that are required, if we approve the bylaw, then the candidates are required to submit that. The returning officer then receives it during the period that has been set aside for nominations. Refresh my memory, does the individual then say to that individual, or does it just accept it and then does a subsequent review? Because at some point, the returning officer has to then indicate whether we're having election and the names of the candidates who have filed approved or acceptable nomination packages, correct?
Through the mayor to Councillor Harris, that's mostly correct. So there is a new requirement under the LAEA that came in with Bill 20 to file a notice of intent to run. And there is a record of all people who have filed their notice of intent to run. Following that is the nomination process, much as you described, including the declaration that you're an eligible candidate. The returning officer does receive the nomination package, verifies that it is complete, and once it is accepted, then you are a candidate, and the candidate list is published on the city's website.
So with this new notice of intent to run, is that something that's allowing people that want to run to start fundraising at an earlier time? Is that kind of ostensibly why they're doing it?
So there is a provision in the LAEA that says you cannot incur any campaign expenses or collect any contributions until you have filed your notice of intent. When the changes to the LAEA were proclaimed on October 31st, that started the clock on the period of time which anyone can file their notice of intent with the city. The city's election website is up to date with that information, and there is an email address where people can file their notice of intent as well as a form.
So all of the things that are happening right now in the city of Edmonton, for example, there have been 3 individuals have indicated their intent to run for the mayor's position.
That's correct. Yeah.
That's what's happening?
That is exactly what's happened there. They've filed their notice of intent.
Okay, good. That's good information.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Batoye?
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Bajaya. So the $100 fee, is that something that's we've seen in other municipalities?
Through the mayor to Councillor Abatoya, yes, some municipalities do have a nomination fee. It's usually a nominal fee. There's a balance between not introducing financial impediments to someone running for elected office. It's debatable whether or not it's the best way to do it. It's just one of the resources available that we can use. So we have opted to go with a nominal fee. However, as I mentioned, this is ultimately council's discretion.
Okay, thank you. My second question is about the permanent electors register. So we're going to have to create that. I guess my question is, how do we ensure data privacy? Because I know that it's a recommendation by the bylaw, but how do we ensure that, people's information is not just out there in the public?
Thank you for that question through the mayor back to Councillor Abatoye. We have to enter into an agreement with Elections Alberta to set up that registry, and there are a number of legal obligations that we, the city, have in terms of how we handle personal information, and we will be required to meet those obligations. So outside of Elections Alberta and the agreement that we enter into, we're still under the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, and all those obligations still apply.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Macon?
Thank you. For when you file your nomination papers, that gets automatically posted to the city's website. Is that the same if you file a notice of intent? That's automatically public information?
Thank you for the question through the mayor back to Councillor Macon. So there is a little bit of a process that needs to happen. It's not automatically made available on the website because we do have to review the notice of intent. There are required pieces of information that we have to make sure are there before we accept it. Once we've verified, accepted the notice of intent, then the website is updated. Now that might take a little bit of time, and there's also a disclosure that tells you what of your information will be made public. It's not all your information, just certain pieces of information that we need to make public.
Okay, thank you. And I'm prepared to move an amendment, or is the wish of council to pass the whole thing and then deal with the amendments, or?
Why don't we do first reading and then we do the amendments, because then it's just cleaner.
Sure. Sounds good.
If you're good with that, but I will make a note that you want to make an amendment. Okay. Okay, Councillor Kelly. Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
I am of the same mindset that Councillor Macon, so let's call the question and let's get on with it.
Okay, so first reading is now closed. Please cast your vote. Okay, and that is carried. Okay, Councillor Kelly.
Let Councillor Macon speak first. I thought she'd be quicker with the button than she turned out to be.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Macon for your amending motion.
I was trying to find in the document.
Can you find it?
Okay. I'll make the motion to amend the bylaw to remove the requirement for a nomination deposit. That bylaw C22-24 be amended by removing section 4.3A.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to speak to your amending motion?
I will, thank you. The part that I don't like about the deposit is the part where some people get it refunded if they're successful, or there's various reasons why you get it refunded. If everyone just had to pay it and you didn't get it back for any particular reason, I would probably support it. But, someone can work the hardest they possibly can through the campaign and be completely committed to it and still not get elected. And there's nothing that they can do to work any harder to get voted in. So I really don't see the fairness of allowing the victors to get that deposit back. So for that reason, I won't support the nomination deposit.
Okay, thank you. So that amending motion is on the floor, removing section 4.3A. It's open for discussion and debate. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. I see the deposit as an entirely different animal, and I'm hard pressed to imagine where somebody could file their nomination papers, pay a deposit, and work absolutely as hard as they could on a campaign that made sense, and that they wouldn't get their deposit back. So I think there's a leap in logic there, and no offense, Councillor Macon. I see it as a way to cull some of the people that are perhaps less enthusiastic from running for council. Every name on the ballot costs the community something, and it also is an added distraction if in fact you're not at all serious or not totally serious about serving as a councillor. So I'm not convinced that we need a deposit either, but I am convinced that $100 is not the number. I don't think it's big enough to stop anything frivolous from happening. And the fact that it is refundable if in fact you run for good reasons and you put together a good campaign and you work hard, I would like to suggest that the deposit would actually be higher. How much, I don't know, but let's throw $500 on the table. Because it is refundable. And when I look at the campaign expenses, traditionally they run into the thousands of dollars. So a $500 refundable deposit in this day and age, I don't see as being prohibitive in any way, stretch, or form. And I do think it has some consequences if in fact you're one of the unfortunate ones that choose to run and you don't get the deposit back. And I think that's the real wake-up call that some individuals might in fact be forced to reckon with if there is the need for a deposit. I'm going to listen to the rest of the comments and weigh in on this particular motion again. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Through my career, I've been responsible for 4 municipal elections over the period of time that I was in government. So I actually did, returning officer, supervise that whole process. And in all of those elections, we've never had, in those experiences, a deposit, a nomination deposit. And I don't think we need to start now. I don't think it accomplishes anything. It's just make work. It's unnecessary, and I support taking it out. I also support taking out the basic criminal record check, but I guess we'll bring that forward as a separate amendment if and as required. So I'll support Councillor Macon in this because I don't think it's necessary. There'll be people that choose to run silly campaigns or do stupid things. When they run for office, it happens all the time. And we have no control over that. That's a personal preference issue. And I think we have to leave it in a personal preference choice. So.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nguyen on discussion and debate of the amendment.
Yeah, I do agree with some of these the ideas that have been discussed so far. Councillor Kelly, you're correct. This fee would have to be substantially higher if we were going to follow the course of making it a slight commitment to people. $100 is not that much, and I don't really see the difference between $100 and $0 for that point. I don't support a fee for the reasons that have obviously been stated already, and I don't think that amount is going to make any different outcome. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Batoye.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I support the fees being in there because I think that it does two things. It discourages unserious people and it encourages, it removes, but like the amounts, I just think 500 would be ridiculous. It would be too much. But the amount is nominal enough to allow people who are interested, who have the right mind set towards serving the community without, saying no to, serving the community. I think the $100 is just a perfect amount to show commitment, but at the same time to deter people who just want to come play and make a show. I also agree with the comment that was made about, providing administrative efficiency because, like, for every name that's on that ballot is an extra work for administration. And heck, this amount could also offset some election costs because we've heard that it's 100 and something thousand to do this election in the budget. So I support the fee that's been recommended by administration. So I wouldn't be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Macon, on discussion and debate, I won't go to you on close yet. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks for the comments. I guess what I would say is that to some of the comments that have been made, if it was about election cost itself, then the fee shouldn't be refunded to anybody, right? Because that cost is borne of any candidate, and that is not an option that is available to us. I can name several people who I felt were all in the last few elections and who were not successful candidates. I really don't think $100 does anything to deter anybody. And to be honest, I think that although not all campaigns are equal, I can't really think of anybody who I would say did not provide commitment to their campaign. Like everyone had signs, everyone was out there, you know, at different levels, sure. But I honestly, I really just don't see the $100 doing anything.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nguyen on discussion and debate.
Yeah, and just one further comment, and it's been said already, but the $100 deposit, just the structure of it is something that I don't agree with being refunded to the, let's call them the winners. It's almost insulting to the other people that ran, and out of respect for all candidates, if we wanted to say it was a fee and it's not a deposit that gets refunded in certain circumstances for certain individuals, then I might think about it a little bit differently. But yeah, so I'm going to support the motion for those reasons.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Macon for close. Nothing on close. The motion is now closed for the amending of removing 4.3A. Please cast your vote. Motion is carried. All right, thank you. Are there any other? Councillor Harris?
I would move that section 4.3 sub B 1 and 2 be deleted from the bylaw.
Okay, thank you. They'll put the motion up. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Well, I understand the reason why the province changed legislation, because they had a small group of people out in nowhere, Alberta, making noises about elections, and obviously taking tabulators out of the legislation was one of the outcomes. This is probably one of the outcomes as well. I think there are other ways to deal with the fact that if somebody has indeed been convicted of a serious criminal offense, if they choose to run for council and they're found out, that's an embarrassment, and there's a whole process for that. And I think that ultimately that we can leave with the courts and the judicial process to deal with that in an appropriate manner. So I would suggest that we can take this out of the bylaw. I don't think it's necessary. And ultimately, we simplify the process going forward.
Okay, thank you. Now it's open for discussion and debate. Councillor Macon?
I see nobody else has clicked in. I was really looking forward to hearing some other comments about this, because right now I'm not sure. I've always felt that this should have been in there. Like from the very first time that I ran, I thought it was unusual that a criminal record check wasn't to be required. In my view, it doesn't stop you from running, but it allows the electorate to know that part and make a decision, because depending on what you've been convicted for, shoplifting 25 years ago and fraud are completely two different things. So I'd love to hear other opinions about it. I'm kind of on the fence for the reason I stated.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Abbott. Oh, just a second. Okay, Councillor Nguyen, I guess you were buzzed in first.
Yeah, my line of thinking on this, for example, I have an acquaintance who I have a great deal of respect for. He's a father. He's a well-educated individual. He has a successful career, and he tells a story to lots of people that when he was quite a bit younger, I think 20 years ago, he has a bit of a story pass, and he was in the restorative justice program. Now, somebody like that who is, I guess maybe along the lines of what Councillor Macon was saying, if there was something like and I don't know what would be considered an offense to which you would disqualify a candidate from running, but if there was something that happened a long time ago that was a rather minor infraction, and then somebody who is convicted of more serious offenses, that's kind of maybe seen in the same boat, and making that public domain. I don't know if there's really merits to that. So the way that I'm looking at this is that it could be potentially meddling in democracy in a way, if you're making this personal. I guess it's a personal matter that you're going to put into the public domain for the longevity of that person's life. So that's kind of the way I see this. These 2 points and the last one on the deposit as well. My initial thoughts when I saw them as kind of optional for the municipality was that these were passed into act by the province with very little consultation from the municipalities. And I think there was a lot of discomfort, and obviously with the change in electronic voting to manual or paper ballots, obviously that puts another burden on the municipalities. So, for that reason, I thought maybe as well that it would be in our best interest to exercise our options according to the amendments that the province made.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Metoyer.
Thank you. I don't think I would support this motion, and I don't support this motion because even for our volunteers, we require a criminal record check. I'm not to talk about someone who's raising their hands to represent the public. I really think that this is something that should be required for all candidates for the election. So as a result, I won't be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I weigh in, so I guess the question that I have is for anybody thinking about running, and we know people have decided maybe last minute to decide to put their nomination in, how long does it take to get a criminal record check? And would that, based on that timing, possibly prohibit them from putting their name forward?
Mayor, I'm sorry, I'm not sure how long it would take. I don't have that information available.
20 minutes.
Okay. Okay. No, I just think it's important to know the answer for that. So that's good that you can get them quickly. So that's good. I'm not sure that this is something that is really necessary, and I kind of have to agree. If you've been arrested or you're a known person, I think the community is going to come out in full force and make sure people know that. I think having your information it's just another step, and I don't really think it's a requirement. When I first heard the lawyer talking about it at Mid-Sized Cities, I thought, okay, that's maybe good. But then as it got kind of watered down, it was like, it's just once again something that's, just another tactic. So I'll probably be supporting the motion. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. Sandy, in your comments, you referenced some criminal offenses that would preclude somebody running for council?
Through the mayor to Councillor Kelly, yes, that's correct. In the Local Authorities Election Act, they do outline certain offenses under the Canadian Criminal Code that would disqualify you as a candidate.
And furthermore, each candidate signs a declaration as part of their nomination that
Correct.
They are able to run, in other words, haven't committed any of those offenses.
Correct.
Thank you. I have a similar story to the one Councillor Nguyen talked about. Mine is nothing to do with elections, but a lot to do with mistakes you occasionally make when you're a young person. My example is I went for a period of about a decade every year. I flew to the States with a group of guys to go golfing. When we would fly out of Alberta and land in California. One of the gentlemen had been on the trip for 4 or 5 years, and then one day he didn't get on the airplane, and we didn't know why, and we couldn't contact him. And we sent a steward out to look for him, and no word back. And after we landed, we found out, of course, that particular day, he'd been hauled over at the border for an offense that he'd committed as a young person. Now, obviously relatively minor, because he'd been in the States in my company for at least the 4 prior years. That particular year, he got somebody grumpy, and he spent the summer driving back and forth to Calgary to get his to the consulate to get his waiver so he could join us the following year. I found that excessively trivial, and frankly ridiculous. And I would hate to have somebody who's a good member of our society be called out for some past indiscretion that is decades old and is of no consequence to anybody in the community anymore. So for that reason, yes. And the fact that there's already the declaration, I don't think we need to have this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Macon on round two.
Thank you. So to Councillor Abatoy's point, I signed up to be a snow angel this year. I required a criminal record check. And I made the comment at the time, I need a criminal record check to go shovel snow at this house, but I can run a whole municipality and be responsible for something substantially larger and not have to prove that. I do believe that if there are disqualification terms in the policy that would allow for us to disqualify a candidate, I don't actually think that there should be anything that precludes us from confirming that, rather than just a signature saying, yep, I've never done that before. And to the point of items that are of no consequence, I would suspect that those type of items aren't on the list of things that you would get disqualified for. So I think I will not support the motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly on round two.
And I'd just like to speak to Councillor Macon's last comments. It strikes me as incredibly odd that a person who volunteers to shovel snow outside of a residence would need a criminal record check. So maybe the question is, who made that requirement rather than should we have the similar requirement? I quite frankly find that requirement to do that volunteer work more than a little bit offensive. You're not locking yourself or being behind closed doors with a group of small children or young children. You're outside shoveling a sidewalk in the middle of winter time. So I'm going to leave my comments at that. I'm going to support the motion. We don't need the criminal record check. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Harris for close. Whoops, just a second. Jeez.
I think that's a good airing of this particular issue. Obviously, we're faced with a new situation with the elections bylaw than we have in previous years, and I think it's appropriate for administration to have brought these suggestions forward for consideration, allow us to make those decisions. I'm moving this because, again, I don't see it's necessary. I think a criminal record check in an appropriate manner, if it's used appropriately to shield people who have had bad history from dealing with children, makes a lot of sense. In this regard, there are people that probably have bad histories for whatever reason that get elected to council all over the world, and certainly all over Alberta. But I don't think that that's our responsibility to police. And I think if somebody wants to step up to the plate and wants to file a nomination paper, they adhere to the legislation and let the chips fall where they may. And so I'm supportive of taking this up because I don't see it as necessary. It doesn't really achieve much of a positive outcome.
Okay, thank you. The motion is now closed. Please cast your vote. And that is carried 4-2. Okay, so now we will require second reading as amended. Did you want to go back to that one since you put the first motion?
I'm finally ready, Mayor Catcher. Thank you.
Okay.
I move that council gives second reading to elections bylaws C-22-24.
As amended.
As amended. Thank you. You're correct.
Okay, thank you. Do you have anything further to speak to it?
Nothing further.
Thank you. It's open for discussion and debate. Not seeing anything further. Nothing on close. You're
Nothing.
good. Motion is now closed. Please cast your vote for second reading. and that is carried. So you can present it for unanimous consent.
Will do. I move that council provide unanimous consent to proceed with third and final reading of elections bylaws C 22-24.
Okay, thank you. I'll close the motion. Please cast your vote. Okay, and that is carried unanimously. You can proceed with third.
Thank you. I move the council give third and final reading to elections bylaws C 22-24.
Thank you. Anything further to speak to it?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Anything further on discussion and debate? Not seeing any. I'll close the motion. Please cast your vote. Thank you, and that is carried. Thank you. All right, so the next one we have is, oh, just a second. Yes, Councillor Harris?
I would like to propose an accessory motion to this particular issue
Okay,
we discussed earlier.
okay, one of those germane to it.
It is. I would like to move that by the end of the second quarter of 2025, administration prepare a report on the feasibility of printing ballots in lots as set out in section 43 sub 3 of the Local Authorities Election Act for the 2025 general municipal election.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to this motion?
I do. The opportunity to print ballots in lots so that no one candidate name appears at the top of all candidates in alphabetical order. So printing ballots in lots means that the lots are staggered so that somebody with letter A is in some, B, C, D, to Z. And so then that removes the potential of somebody going down and just voting the first 6, A, B, 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 and without actually being informed to make the decision. So I think printing ballots in lots is a procedural fairness thing that ultimately gives everybody to be the first on the ballot, if you will. So I would like administration to bring back some information relative to the feasibility of doing that. And ultimately, I think that with this year, with the decision of the province to remove electronic tabulators from the process, it is going to be a normal, time-consuming process to conduct tally ballots on all of our election. And it's a pretty simple process, and it has been done for many, many, many years. It's just not as efficient as what it could be without electronic tabulators. So I would like to hear from the administration as there is a provision in the legislation to print ballots in lots, and I'd like a little bit more information. I think it would be worthwhile for council to receive that information and potentially make an amendment to the bylaw before the 2-month period expires before the election.
Okay, thank you. This motion is open for discussion and debate. Councillor Kelly?
I have no problem with the motion whatsoever. I do question by the end of the second quarter, because we only have really one meeting early July before summer recess. And I'm wondering, Councillor Harris, if it wouldn't make more sense to set the deadline of at least, let's say, May 31 to give the month of June for council to wrestle with it.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I have no problem with the date. This was recommended to me by administration. I suspect that it would be fairly straightforward to be able to do this type of analysis. I'd be surprised if it couldn't be done within a period of about a week, quite frankly. But I can't speak for the workload that our administration has. So I'm easy. I looked at administration.
Sure. Through the mayor to Councillor Harris, there's no issue with changing the date. We could even change it to the end of quarter 1. I was just being respectful of Mr. Kaiser's parental leave.
Okay. What is your wish? It's your motion.
I'd do it by the end of quarter 1 if that's the case, because I don't think this is a difficult thing to do an analysis on.
Okay, so we'll take that as a change and I will accept that. Councillor Kelly, you still have the floor.
That was my only comment. And it doesn't need to be into Q1. I just would like to have the opportunity for council to have 2 meetings before summer recess, if in fact something happened and we needed them. That's the only thing I was looking for.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Batoye.
Thank you. I will not be supporting this motion as well. And honestly, I feel like the Grinch right now, voting against everything. But and I don't support the motion because there's really very limited evidence of impacts. I believe that we have a well-informed voter base in Fort Saskatchewan, and no one's going to go and vote A, B, C, D. I also question a lot of things, the kind of impact it would have in terms of additional time, the training that will be required from the counters, probably increase election costs as a result of this. I think that we should honestly be focused on higher priorities, things like how do we get higher voter turnouts? How do we get higher engagements? This is really, to me, is just really a minor procedural change that with really uncertain or limited benefits. So I think that with the changes in the bylaw that's requiring us to not use tabulators, but to get actually hand counts, I think it's making a difficult job even much more difficult. So I will not be supporting this motion. I understand where you're coming from, but I don't think this is the time or this is the year to do this. I think we need to get used to hand counting ballots first and see how that goes, and then maybe it can be introduced in another elections. But I want to be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nguyen on discussion and debate.
Yeah, sort of reminds me for the 3 youngest on council of the Scantrons we had in high school, so that you couldn't read off your buddy's test results, and so they were randomized sort of in the same way for fairness. I do support the concept. I'm just curious. I guess it was administration's recommendation to make a feasibility report for this. I would almost rather just have the motion to do it or not do it. So the feasibility report needs to be done for what reason exactly? And obviously it's coming back for a decision, but why can't we just go to the decision if it can be done, if we know it can be done?
Through the mayor to Councillor Nguyen, the reason administration asked for some time and to do a feasibility report, it's just so that we could do some due diligence and see if there's an additional cost for printing ballots and lots. What is that cost? Will there be an impact to timing or to any other impact? It's just to allow us some time to flush that out and allow council to make an informed decision. So that was a request of administration.
Okay, it sounds diligent and thorough, so I'm happy to support the motion if that's the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. So I've got a question for you. So I support it in principle, but I don't support it on the basis of the recent change that the province just put in, because I think if you could do it electronically and you can confirm or let me know if it was electronic, it would be more accurate. But if it's being hand counted and then people are having to switch where their eyes are going and that, isn't there greater room for error?
To you, Madam Mayor, I'm not completely certain, but it is something administration would like some time to investigate, which is why we're requesting the time for the feasibility report. We want to make sure we're supporting council to make informed decisions when they are facing these details. And if this can be accommodated and accommodated well, we will also let council know as part of that report. I do share some of your concerns about the impact accounting and how that would work. We just need a little time to investigate that further.
Okay, and I think that's fair. So, okay. Councillor Harris on close.
I've counted thousands of ballots. I've done this. I don't know if any of you else have, but I have, and I've been responsible for elections. So tally ballots are not difficult. It's just a question of it's time consuming, and that's the way we did it the first year that I came to the city of Fort Saskatchewan. The election after 1996, I think 1998 or whenever it was. And the city did manual counting for years and years and years. It's not a difficult thing. It's just time consuming. And it just means that there's a process for validation, so that the count can be certified as accurate and consistent. And administration does that with every election they have in the past, and they will continue to do so in the future, I would imagine. So I don't see this as a particularly onerous thing if it came down. If they come back and say that it's not reasonable, I mean, it's been in the legislation for years, so it's not new. It's not as if something came about as a result of the UCP and all of their kind of crazy things that they did to municipalities in the, in Bill 20. That's just nuts. But what I'm suggesting is this is something I think makes sense, and it's procedurally fair to do it. And it should have been done in the past, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. The motion is now closed. Please cast your vote. Motion is carried 5-1. Are there any other amending motions that are germane to this? Okay, if not, thank you very much. All right, are there any notice of motions? Councillor Kelly, I understand you have to push your button. Okay, go ahead.
I do, Mayor Catcher. In fact, I've got 3 just to give council a heads up.
Okay, you can read them in.
All of them arise out of, my phone's acting up, out of our recent budget discussions. I think I gave everybody at the time a heads up. You have, perfect, you have them in the same order I have them. I'll read it off the screen. At the December 10, 24 council meeting, I will move the following motion. That by the end of the first quarter of 2025, administration review council policy FIN 009-C user fees and charges and report on potential policy changes or other options that would accomplish the following. Possible alternative approaches to considering community benefit in the policy, amendments that would reduce the reliance on comparators and place greater emphasis on cost recovery, and thirdly, options for a long-term plan to increase user fees so that they address a higher portion of operating costs.
Okay, thank you. That's the first one.
And the second one, at the December 10, 24 meeting, I will move the following motion. That by the end of the first quarter of 2025, administration provide a report on the rationale for the city's strategies as set out in the operating and capital budgets policy for budgeting for ongoing and one-time capital projects, including information on how administration determines which capital expenditures are best funded through property tax revenues versus grant funds. And the third and last one, at the December 10, 24 council meeting, I will move the following motion. That by the end of the second quarter of 2025, administration provide a report outlining the rationale for the extension of current transit service, as well as a rationale for how transit services are managed as the city grows.
Okay, thank you very much. May have to move our 10th meeting to noon instead of 1 o'clock. Okay. All right. Are there any other notice of motions? Okay. Not seeing any points of interest. Councillor Macon?
Sorry, I thought inquiries was next.
Okay, points of interest. Just a reminder to everybody, Lights Up is this Friday evening. So please dress warm and come out and celebrate all of the festivities because staff have been working very hard on it and it's going to be pretty chilly. So dress warm and come out and enjoy. Okay. Councillor inquiries of administration. Go ahead, Councillor Macon.
So just in light of the 3 notice of motions, I would like to ask the question about our time for that meeting because we did reduce it to 1 o'clock. Was that in anticipation of these motions or do we need further consideration tonight on that?
Mr.
Because
Fleming.
3 motions, like these 3 could take some time.
That was not in we moved it before we knew about the 3 notice of motions, but I don't believe we have the ability to move it any earlier. because of availability.
Okay.
So I think it's just, it is what it is.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Just be prepared to stay late that night. Okay, so with that, I am going to recess this meeting for, do you need 5 minutes or a little
Anywhere
bit longer?
from 5 to 10, please. Yes.
10, so till 4:40. So we will go in recess. When we return, we will do the Emergency Advisory Committee at that point in time. So we'll recess till 4:40.